Hey, it is Kenny's Audiophile Record Reviews. Thank you very much for viewing my video. As always, please like and subscribe. That'll help my growing channel out. I really appreciate that. In this video, I'm going to mention my top 10 favorite jazz trumpet players of all time. Please leave yours in the comment section below. As I always say in these videos, there's no right or wrong answer. I know a lot of you out there take these lists too seriously, in my opinion, in terms of the way you leave those comments in the comment section below. Like I said, just my personal opinion. You know, we can't force our top 10 lists on anybody else. This is personal to me. This is personal in terms of how I perceive jazz and how I enjoy jazz. In my personal opinion, who are the top 10 jazz trumpet players of all time. So please keep that in mind. Let's be respectful in the comments. I really appreciate that. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. There really isn't. Please leave your top 3, top 5, top 10 favorite jazz trumpet players in the comment section below. Before I get to my top 10, I'm going to mention a few who did not make my top 10. And then I'm going to get to my top 10. These that I'm going to mention now are trumpet players, jazz trumpet players who did not make my top 10. And oh, by the way, this is jazz trumpet players, this list. It's not pop trumpet players, R&B trumpet players. For the most part, these are jazz trumpet players I'm going to mention in this video. So I'm going to mention, you know, the ones who did not make my top 10. Then I'm going to mention my top 10. An example of a jazz trumpet player who did not make my top 10, who was a fantastic trumpet player, is Eddie Henderson. Eddie Henderson, as great as he is, as significant he is as a trumpet player, did not make my top 10. Now, some of you may have this trumpet player in your top 5. My top 10 is stacked as far as I'm concerned in terms of talented trumpet players. So this trumpet player did not make my top 10, and he's highly popular. And he can sing too. Chet Baker. The sensational Chet Baker did not make my top 10. As excellent as a trumpet player he actually is, he did not make my top 10. There was just not enough space for the great Chet Baker, and I'm a big Chet Baker fan, but he's not in my top 10. Neither is the magnificent Clark Terry. He is not in my top 10. I used to listen to this jazz trumpet player when I was in high school a lot. I was a huge fan of his work, especially when I was high school. This brother can blow with the best of them. That's Maynard Ferguson. A tremendous jazz trumpet player. I like some of the, the big band work he did, in the 70s, and what a significant and great jazz trumpet player Maynard Ferguson was. Art Farmer did not make my top 10. Also, Roy Hargrove did not make my top 10. Blue Mitchell did not make my top 10. The legendary Harry James did not make my top 10. This is a really good album. This is a direct-to-disc album that came out, I think, in the late 70s, I believe, early 80s, 1977. Direct-to-disc. Harry James did not make my top 10. Don Ellis did not make my top 10 either. Now, some of you may not think of this musician as a strict jazz musician, because he, went into, maybe a little bit of pop, maybe a little bit of adult contemporary music, and that is Al Hirt. I thought I would mention him because of his talent as a trumpet player, but he did not make my top 10, as great as he is. What a sensational trumpet player Al Hirt was. Another trumpet player did not make my top 10 is Doc Severinsen. I think he's an underrated trumpet player. He was in the Tonight Show band when Johnny Carson was on the show during Tonight Show's heyday. But Doc Severinsen, a great band leader as well, did not make my top 10. This is an album that he did with the Tonight Show. Tonight Show band. This is Volume 2, and also have the first record, Volume 1. Doc Severinsen, a highly underrated jazz trumpet player. I have to mention that there was this cornet player, and I'm going to mention a cornet player as part of my top 10 because I'm not going to do a top 10 on cornet players, so I thought I'd include the cornet in this video as well, although technically it's not a trumpet. Big Spiderbeck. I have one of his 2 CD sets. I think it's 2 CD sets. And he was highly significant, very legendary cornet player. And unfortunately, he passed away, I think, at a very early age, maybe in his late 20s or early 30s. So I thought I would mention Big Spiderbeck. What a great cornet player he was, no doubt about that. Excuse me. Now I'm going to get to my top 10. And the 10 slot is a tie. And it's a tie between a player who's mainly known as a cornet player, but he was a multi-instrumentalist. He played, I think, maybe the flute, the cornet, the trumpet, maybe several other instruments. And that's Don Cherry. He's tied at number 10. Don Cherry has this really great and very significant, very underrated jazz free jazz album called Symphony for Improvisers. And it is a sensational jazz, free jazz album that you definitely should listen to get a feel of the skill set of Don Cherry. Symphony for Improvisers is a great album. Don Cherry is tied in number 10 with the Great Bird. That is the great Donald Byrd. What a tremendous trumpet player he was on the Blue Note label and beyond. So he had to make my top 10. So Donald Byrd and Don Cherry are tied at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is a magnificent Kenny Dorham. And this is his highly rated Quiet Kenny album that you should definitely check out if you want to get a feel for the skill set and the talent set of Kenny Dorham. Check out the Quiet Kenny album. Kenny Dorham is at number 9 on my top 10 jazz trumpet players list. Coming in at number 8, and this title says it all. The magnificent Thad Jones. What a skillful and talented and magnificent. This brother can blow with the best of them. Thad Jones. It is a great album, by the way, too. Check it out on YouTube. Thad Jones coming in at number 8 on my top 10 list. At number 7, Lee Morgan. His life, unfortunately, was cut short, tragically. Who knows what heights he could have elevated to. He was really just a fabulous jazz trumpet player, in my opinion. This is his great Lee Morgan at the Lighthouse. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a 3 CD set, but there's a bigger set as well of his Lighthouse performances we'll have to get at some point. But highly talented Lee Morgan. Like I said, too bad his life was ended too soon, but Lee Morgan coming in at number 7. Coming in number 6, Clifford Brown. This is a collaboration between, this is a reissue record, Clifford Brown and Max Roach. He had a great tonality to his play. Sensational trumpet player. Clifford Brown coming in number 6. Coming in number 5, I have on my list because he is a great classical trumpet player. I have a few of his collaborations in the classical realm and a lot of his jazz work, and that is Wynton Marsalis is coming in at number 5. He is a highly underrated jazz trumpet player. He doesn't get the props he deserves in a lot of these top 10 lists and a lot of these greatest jazz musicians of all time. He's a great educator in terms of communicating jazz education to an audience. Very knowledgeable about jazz, the jazz trumpet, and just music in general. Wynton Marsalis coming in at number 5. Now we're at number 4. I love his play, his early Blue Note works through his CTI albums, especially that Red Clay album. Freddie Hubbard. Highly talented, sensational jazz trumpet player. You can make a case he's underrated as well. I think he's up there with the greats, so he's number 4 on my list. Freddie Hubbard coming in at number 4. Now we're down to the top 3. Now each one of these 3 easily can be number 1 on anybody's list, either one of them. It doesn't matter, but they're in the top 3. Coming in at number 3, from a historical point of view, from a a leadership point of view in terms of his trailblazing work in jazz and with the jazz trumpet, is Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy Gillespie, what a legend he is. His work is just fantastic over the years. Again, a great communicator and educator in terms of jazz and jazz history. Dizzy Gillespie coming in at number 3 on my list. Coming in at number 2, again, he easily could be number 1 because he is historically significant. He was a great trailblazer for musicians during his era. He was very great for a long time. Like Chet Baker, he had a very nice singing voice. I think he was one of the early innovators, one of the early leaders, and he set the framework, as far as I'm concerned, for jazz trumpet players for decades in the future, and that is Louis Armstrong. This is a collaboration between Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. This is a great record, by the way. It sounds fantastic. And, Pops can play. I mean, he was just... I know I made this Michael Jordan reference in my top 10 greatest piano players list of all time, but he might be what Michael Jordan was to basketball. Louis Armstrong is probably the same thing for jazz trumpet. Louis Armstrong coming in 2nd. Coming in at number 1, and since I haven't mentioned him yet, and if you're followers of my channel, you know how I think about this musician, so you probably know who I'm talking about. He was great for a long time, really an innovator in terms of, how he changed the scope of jazz, the dimension of jazz, for years. He played with Charlie Parker. He had that great, Kind of Blue album. Miles Davis is number 1 on my list. From his work from Charlie Parker to Kind of Blue, Sketches of Spain, the mid-60s, mid-60s work In a Silent Way, The Sorcerer, Miles Smiles, all the way through his jazz fusion work, Bitches Brew, his Jack Johnson album. I think he's the best and greatest jazz trumpet player who ever lived, in my opinion. He changed, gracefully and greatly with the time as he transitioned from the 50s, his work with Gil Evans, the Sketches of Spain work, throughout his Bitches Brew work, like I said, Jack Johnson, all the way through, Miles on the Corner. Miles Davis, the greatest jazz trumpet player who ever lived, in my opinion. Please leave yours in the comment section below. I really appreciate that. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate that as well. Thank you very much for viewing my video. God bless, strong love, and I always say, more importantly than music, more importantly than this audiophile stuff, more important than records, keep the peace worldwide.